It's really common in English when you are taking a reservations from from the restaurant, you will be asked the caller like, "Hey, can you spell your name for me?" But this concept of spelling your name doesn't really exist in Asian languages such as Mandarin and Japanese. Instead of asking how do you spell your name, we ask you how do you write your name. That really makes a difference on how callers will feel if this language is being just translated or is actually sounds like a real human.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Deep Learning with PolyAI. We're here to help CX leaders get a window into the latest and greatest developments in AI. So I'm your guest host, Jenn Cunningham. I'll be subbing in for Nicola today to bring you insights from our PolyAI experts on multilingual capabilities and why they matter. So obviously, it's a podcast. Have to encourage you to hit the subscribe button, give us a like on YouTube, or leave a 5-star rating in the podcast app. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Matt and Viola. If you two could please introduce yourselves.
Hey, I'm Matt. I'm a VP of Research at PolyAI and leading a team that's, among other things, training LLMs. So excited to talk about that today. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I am Viola. I'm the product manager of PolyAI, have been focusing on enabling multilingual capabilities on our agent.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm so excited. When kind of the idea for this podcast episode first came about, I thought it would be really great to talk about our multilingual capabilities because Matt, with Raven v3, we have these fantastic new capabilities built into the LLM. But then Viola, you've also been working on all of these fantastic upgrades to Agent Studio from a platform perspective. So it seems only fitting that we really talk about multilingual solutions, especially now. So when we think about the history of PolyAI, we're called PolyAI because our founders were all polyglots. And so it seems only fitting that we have a polyglot solution as well that can kind of support different languages. I recently got back from our Vox event in San Diego, and the theme was fluent. And so we were thinking about fluency as mastery, right, in terms of conversational AI. But there is just fluency in multiple languages, and being able to have a multilingual solution. So I guess, Matt, Viola, curious to get your thoughts on what does multilingual really mean in the world of voice AI? Matt, I guess maybe if we want to start with you.
Yeah, totally. So, I guess there's one sort of distinction that's interesting is whether we're talking about a single conversation that's multilingual, and that we do have use cases like that, where we don't know if the person on the end of the line is going to speak to us in Spanish or English or whatever, and then we're able to switch back and forth, and maybe we start talking to them in one language, and then they tell us, I don't speak this, and then we're able to switch back and there's interesting things there, like what happens to the speaker identity, this text to speech. Like, we can have multilingual text to speech models that sound like the same person speaking fluently each of those languages. Um, but also, there's multilingual in terms of a project. So, say I have a business that spans multiple countries. Maybe I'm comfortable prompting for it in English, but I want it to be able to go out there and speak not just English, but various other languages. We do support dozens of languages there. So each of those has like interesting modeling challenges, and we're able to do each of those too. Is that what you'd say too, Viola?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you cover everything.
Okay.
Words. Well, Viola, you've seen quite a lot in terms of multilingual capabilities. I know we've worked a bit on terms of adding in additional languages into the platform. I know Arabic is one we're really excited about. Um, but I guess, can you talk a little bit in terms of how we've been able to evolve in terms of multilingual voice AI, if we're thinking from a platform perspective? What was a
Mhm.
kind of historically, how were we deploying, and what were some of the pain points with that? And kind of, so what's like really exciting basically about the awesome work that you've been doing this whole year?
Yeah, Really good questions. I think in the old way, when we are building multilingual bot, what we would be able to do is to separate the language bot. So, for example, if you want your bot to speak English and Mandarins and Japanese, we have to do three bots, and then in each bot you have to put the prompt in the local language. So you have to prompt in English, you have to prompt in Japanese and Mandarin, and that comes a lot of different challenges. First one is really difficult to maintain. We have seen a lot of requirements from US. They will have the needs for having the bot to be able to speak English and Spanish. They are basically sharing the same FAQ, sharing the same workflow, but it has to be in two separate languages. It's really hard to maintain. It's really hard to do the code reviews across different languages. And also it's very hard to scale. Let's say if one day they want to add one more language, it's called like French or German, you have to build a separate bot. So I think historically that has been very difficult. But that was last year. So this year we do have a new solutions, which we are really excited about. Now we have done a lot of evaluations and testings on new models. So we are introducing a current unified multilingual system to allow users to build and manage all the languages in a single bot, which means that you can build a single bot and then with everything, all the prompt in English, and then the bot will be able to understand and then speak multiple languages. And
No.
other than that, we are also giving you the capabilities to fine-tune your bot. That's why we call it in Language Hub and Agent Studio, because we believe that like multilingual is not only about translations, but it's also about like delivering this superhuman experience that can be like in different languages. So I will give a little bit examples on what do we mean by fine-tune capabilities. We have faced a lot of like language nuances in different language. For example, it's really common in English when you are taking a reservations from from the restaurant, you will be asked the caller like, "Hey, can you spell your name for me?" But like this concept of spelling your name doesn't really exist in Asian languages such as Mandarin and Japanese. Instead of asking how do you spell your name, we ask you how do you write your name. And then in Arabic, it's even more interesting. You don't even have to ask them how do you spell your name or how do you write your name, because the restaurant staff will know how do you spell your name once you told them, hey, my name is like Muhammad or Ahmed. So those kind of things is quite straightforward, but that really makes a difference on how callers will feel if this language is being just translated or it actually sounds like a real human. So in the Language Hub we are offering in PolyAI, we give you per language prompt tweaking that you can do tiny tweaking to your languages to make it sound even more natural. And then we also give you extra space for adding system prompt or style guides for different languages. And then we also give you the capabilities of selecting different voices.
Which is awesome. It's so awesome. It's like, I think especially in terms of what we've been hearing a lot from the market is people don't want to maintain all of these separate solutions, but there is still this individual nuance required. And so this is really opening up the platform to be a common knowledge base across countries, across languages, but you can still deliver these like nuanced cultural experiences, or I guess culturally informed experiences, if that makes sense, or conversations, in a way where you're able to keep customers engaged and make them feel supported, because it's just not a fun experience. Very rarely are people calling up, very rarely are you calling up because something's gone right. But if you're calling up and you're like, hey, I had trouble booking online, I need to be able to book over the phone. Or maybe I know we were kind of laughing because we saw something recently where someone had forgotten their anniversary, right? And so they were calling up, hey, do you have a table available in 10 minutes, right? And it's yeah, what's the occasion? And it's an anniversary. Like you forgot your anniversary, you need to book it right now. And if someone asks, okay, yeah, so what's your name, or how do you spell your name? And it should be, how do you write your name? That it makes a big difference in terms of making people feel supported.
Yeah.
Right.
It could be a kind of like vibe thing I mean, you can tell if you're speaking in a non-English language, if you're talking to something that's just doing translation in the background,
Mhm.
like it will just sound like English word order or like English
Yeah.
constructions kind of like forced into your language. And so like yeah, I guess we're taking advantage of all these amazing new models that are multilingual and stuff, but we're also saying like when you need to get it right in a certain language, we do it, make sure the model does as best you can, but also there's the right places for you to prompt it. I mean, like
Right.
even saying like, what can I help you with today? Like the I and the you might be gendered in other languages, which is just not a thing in English. Uh, Help you with, like having with at the end. That's the kind of thing that a sort of naive system would do in another language, which just doesn't sound natural. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. And Matt, that's actually a really great segue. Do you want to kind of talk about some of the fantastic work that you've done with Raven v3 and some of the core differentiators that you're seeing with this, I think, especially relative to other solutions on the market?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think this is like one of the appealing things about large language models, or just like large models trained on lots of data, is that they just seem to miraculously do well across other languages, even if you didn't really try to train them to be multilingual. Like they've just read everything that's available on the internet, and um, you know, you sort of talked a bit about the history of this company and that like we wanted it to be a polyglot system. That Nikola Mircic, the CEO, he has a paper in like 2017, which is all about cross-lingual like word embeddings, and there were people then were doing all these kind of like really interesting and like intricate um, techniques to make models work across languages. So
Yeah.
um, transfer your knowledge in English to different languages, but now we don't think about that stuff. It just works, right? Like it's just it's trained on all these different languages, and when you prompt it in English, but say respond in French, like it has a go. Um, but what we've done with Raven v3 is just make sure that works like super well and super reliably. So if we look at something like GPT-5 and we prompt it in English, but tell it to respond in a different language, but 98% of the time it does do that.
Yeah.
But that the 2% is such a bad error. I'd say for Chinese it's something like 96%, so Mandarin.
Yeah.
And so like 4% of the time it just talks to you in English, and then what happens then? Like it goes into a Chinese text to speech model, and this is just such a bad experience.
It's
Um,
just,
yeah.
but yeah. So I guess, so we're saying like 98, 96% with GPT-5. What is the actual language consistency that you're seeing with Raven v3?
So like on our test it's like almost 100%, so 99.9, and the yeah. And so that's the kind of thing where being able to train our own model like really helps, because if we see a type of error that can happen, we just train it out of the system. We do the gradient update so that just can't happen again. Um, and we can teach the model exactly how we're going to prompt it for this type of use case. So this is like a built-in feature of Raven v3, is that you can say what language you want the response to be in, and then it will just work.
Yeah.
So all of the content could be in English, like all the FAQs and everything, and it will do its best job at speaking to you naturally and like grammatically in that language that you've requested.
Yeah, which is ideal. And is that really out of the box performance that you're seeing too, where just you can just talk?
Yeah, so like we train it so that that works pretty well. And then of course, like we're saying, the more you sort of prompt it to specifically targeted toward that language, like the better. But at least it's not going to respond to you in English, which is just like very like this error that does come up with other models.
Oh, absolutely. And I think because we have quite a few folks at the company who speak different languages. So we also got some native speaker input across all of the different languages as well to make sure that performance was kind of up to par, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, like a big things like I was saying about like gendered pronouns and formality levels and things. Um, uh, those are that's the kind of thing that came up through those discussions with our sort of with our dialogue designers that speak all these different languages. So we basically maintain through their feedback a sort of style guide or um, instructions for our language model tuning, so that we get it right in each of those languages. And then we also realize we sort of figure out what is that prompting format to say, okay, you speak in like this tone, or avoid gendered pronouns unless it's very clear which ones are appropriate to use, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess like style is a big thing, and that's another sort of difference between Raven v3 and Raven v2, is that we've really taught it on a style guide, which is not just in English but also in these other languages. So if you talk to Raven v3 and compare it to other like public models, you'll see like it's much shorter in English and much more like direct and friendly and conversational, and it just makes the conversations go smoother. Yeah.
Which is ideal. I mean, I know I still get into trouble. I've been in the UK for 4 years, but I have very direct American English communication style. And sometimes step on a couple toes. Like, I'm really not trying to be mean. I'm trying to be efficient. I'm so sorry. Um, but Viola, I know you also did a bit of testing in terms of Japanese deployments as well, right? So what did you kind of see there in terms of tuning, formality, cultural nuance required?
So Japanese is the language that they have different level of formalities and politeness. So because we are serving customer service industry, so we have to be extra politeness in Japanese. So when I first using like GPT, like trying to get customer service related dialogue or conversations, it's not really polite. It's more casual, treating you as a friend. But if we are trying to use in customer service, we need this level of extra politeness, and then all the terms they are using has to be extra polite. I think that's really important. And I was also like supporting the teams to doing testing in different languages in our bots. So for example, Hindi is a really interesting one. They have the gender formality considerations because in the beginning, I think we have the issues of it's a female voice, but they are referring themselves as a he when they are talking. So that kind of caused a little bit of confusion. So that's really interesting.
So if we're zooming out a bit and looking at the overall tech stack behind really quality multilingual solutions, we have ASR, we have RAG, we have the LLM, and then we have the voice component. So Viola, can you kind of talk about how all of these things come together
Mhm.
under the hood Agent Studio to power conversations in a really natural way?
Yeah, of course. That's why multilingual comes as a really complicated challenge for us to do, because in each different models, they will have like each language, they will have like the best model mix. So for example, English, they might have good model of ASL for this one, and then another good RAG model for another one. But luckily, we through our evaluations and also our in-house developments, we have found really good model mix for different languages. So for example, ASR, which is automatic speech recognition, we found out that GPT-4 transcribe is actually pretty good across most of the languages. Only a few languages they have better other models such as Bulgarian, Croatian, and Serbian. And for the RAG, we also have a really good multilingual RAG that can be very helpful on picking the most relevant topic, ensure accurate information is being retrieved by most of the languages. And then for the LLM side, we have Raven v3, which is designed for multilingual and customer service industry. And then the tricky one comes as voice, actually. It's the most challenging component for us. Um, we can see the common problems of that. The voice might sound really good in the samples, but then kind of fail with longer text, especially the voices with different tones. For example, Mandarin has 4 tones, Cantonese has 9 tones. So during the sample, we might hear, oh, actually it sounds pretty good when they say, how can I help you? But then when we input longer text, it will fail in some of like the part of the sentences, some of the certain phrases. So then it won't be like a really, really good voice. And other than that, we also see a lot of voices that have this issues of they will speak English accents with the languages that's not actually not English. There Yeah, there are a few voices they claim that they can do multilingual. For example, there might be a voice called whatever, like Alan, and then he could speak English, could speak German, he could speak Spanish, but he might be really good at speaking English. But when he speaks German, he will have this English accent when he speaks German. So then that's not ideal. And it's also
No.
very common in languages that they are mixing English plus different languages together. So let's take an example of Japanese. They will usually say Japanese and then they will also speak English mixing with the Japanese, but then they use their own Japanese way to pronounce the English. So imagine when you are talking to a voice agent and then they speak perfect Japanese, but when they switch to English for certain terms, they say a perfect English. And then you immediately know that that's actually a voice bot instead of a real person. So we don't want this to happen. So yeah, so the voice speaking is kind of tricky, I would say. I think we value quality over claim capability.
No, and it's really important, right? I think it's just like it's interesting when you're thinking of it from the deployment standpoint. Because I remember one of our very early forays into generative, or I think it was our first generative deployment. Actually, the bot hallucinated that it spoke Spanish, even though we had no prompting, no knowledge, no nothing in there saying you speak Spanish, right? And so it was just this very, it was a really weird, it was just bizarre to hear, right? Because it was saying everything with this thick English accent. It kind of sounded like, I would imagine, like an A1 Spanish class just trying to read off whatever the words are, right? Um, but at the same time, it's like, how do you maintain that consistency? How do you really develop or make people kind of build trust?
Yeah, I think one thing other than is also important is about the accent. Because, for example, English, you can have British English, you can have American English, Canadian English, Ireland English. So there are a lot of different accents for different languages. Even in Spanish, you will have Mexican Spanish, US Spanish, and Spain Spanish. So in the voice wise, even in also in the ASR, we need to find really good models that will be able to accommodate those changes. Because people, like local people, they are really good at recognizing, oh, they are not speaking my language. It's a different accent.
Right. And and these are things that I think we've all probably encountered in human to human conversations. And I mean, it's like, especially in London, everyone is from everywhere, right? So I don't really care if I talk to someone on the phone and they have an accent, but it's different when it's an automated system. If you're like, hey, you're representing a business in Spain, this is a robot, why did you choose a Mexican accent, or why did you choose, say, like a Chilean accent or something? I don't think someone would choose Chilean. Um, but I mean, we've seen kind of real world implementations and support of kind of these multilingual solutions, right? I think back to our FedEx deployment, which I honestly always forget the number of languages that we're currently deployed in because we've
Mhm.
been able to expand so much in that geo footprint. I want to say we're at 18 for a single project, but I may be mistaken, which is not great when you're on the marketing team and you're meant to be kind of the single source of truth for the marketing materials and stats. But I guess, how are we thinking about these language support tiers, and how do we make sure that when we say we can do a language, how do we make sure that we're able to deploy in an appropriate way that's really a valuable solution?
So currently we have separate all the languages into three tiers. Tier one is the language that we have the most confidence of, and we also have a lot of project deployments, which includes three languages, which is English UK, English US, and US Spanish. We have like highest project volumes, and then we have a lot of confidence in it. And then the tier two, we have around like 28 languages. We constantly have demo requests, and then we have projects among those different languages. And then tier three is the language that we have been getting requests for demo. We have done like a lot of thorough testing. So internally, how do we count a language as ready? We will go through evaluations and testings for all the four model dimensions that we just mentioned, which is ASR, RAG, LLM, and like text to speech, which is voice. So we have to go through testing and evaluations for those different models, and then testing a little bit on our example bot to see if we are having a good support on that. So I think in total we have around like more than 45 language supporting by PolyAI with confidence.
Which is pretty crazy.
It's a lot of work on evaluation. It's like, you're not just doing an English test set, but checking across dozens of other languages and all the different use cases in each of those languages. But I mean, the cool thing is, like, I guess it was not totally expected, is a lot of the time a single model can do all the languages. So I guess
Yeah.
it used to be that multilingual was kind of a compromise you'd make, where you'd say,
Yeah.
okay, I could be really good at one language or this language, or I throw them all together and I'm kind of medium at all of them. But now the models are big enough, they have such big capacity. I feel that the the different languages actually help each other, right? And there's like
Yeah.
learning across each of them. Yeah, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
No, it's pretty fantastic. Also, when you think of like smart analyst and how we're able to analyze the different conversations and different kind of trends within what's happening in the contact center or just in terms of customer interactions across the board, to be able to basically combine your Spanish speaking contact center, your English speaking contact center. Sometimes these are all in one contact center, but sometimes these are really disparate when they're deployed kind of physically, right? So to be able to bring it all together and get those cohesive insights is incredible. Um, I know we have some advanced features as well when we're thinking through supporting, especially conversations over the phone from a multilingual capability perspective, right? In terms of like different routing logic and being able to switch languages mid-call.
Yeah, I think we implemented a little bit more logic, advanced features based on tailor for multilingual capabilities. For example, we have routing logic that based on the language detection. So no matter which language you speak, we can kind of know in the first turn, and then we'll be able to route you to the correct language. And then sometimes it really depends on the clients. They might be wanting to set the language in the first term. So for example, when the phone is being answered in the first term, we will ask them, do you want to speak English or Spanish? And that's the point when we route you to different languages. And the other tiny tricks we have been implementing and doing a lot is mid-calling. Like during the turn, we'll do mid-call language switching, which we call kind of like fake handoff. So for example, if I'm in a call and then I'm speaking English, suddenly I want to switch to Spanish, let's say, and then in our agents, we can implement this logic saying that, okay, let me hand you off to our Spanish agent. And then you might hear a little bit of ringtone or wait a little bit of music. And then we will hand you off to actually our Spanish bot. So this is kind of like a seamless experience for the callers. Other than that, I think Jan mentioned a good point about smart analyst. Smart analyst is actually pretty good on giving analysis and evaluations for calls in different languages. Because before, when we are building languages in different bot, it's kind of hard to have an aggregated view for users to understand what's the performance across different languages. And also, in different languages, there's no way for you to do code review because I don't understand Spanish, I don't understand German. But now we have smart analysts, so you will be able to like tell you, okay, what's happened with this phone calls? What's kind of like the challenge the user is facing? So now we do have quite a lot of enablement allow people to build and review and manage the agents in the multilingual settings.
Yeah, you're good. I think when we think of the core LLM component behind it, right? We have Raven v3's 100% consistency. This is a real differentiator, I would say, in terms of other LLMs on the market today. But also that we're able to look at this multilingual component of conversations and know that it isn't just about straight translation, right? It's really looking at this cultural intelligence and being able to make sure customers feel heard and supported. And so then, Viola, I think you did a really fantastic job of kind of outlining how our platform and LLM work together to be scalable from a multilingual deployment perspective. But I guess just Matt, one last question for you. What's next?
Raven v4, obviously. So this is going to be our steps towards speech to speech, right? So an audio native language model, and I guess that's kind of what's been coming up a bit in this conversation is that oftentimes the voice part is the hard part of multilingual, and the LLM, everything's in text. There's obviously a lot of challenges in getting the text to sound fluent. But if you're not able to understand across multiple languages and you're not able to speak in multiple languages, then like that's a non-starter. So,
Yeah.
so Raven v4, we're training to directly perceive audio. So they won't need a separate multilingual speech recognizer. It just will be implicitly able to do multilingual speech recognition. Um, and that's bringing the sort of power and reasoning um, capabilities of the LLM to the speech understanding task.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess normally we think of speech recognition as sort of self-contained smaller model, it takes audio and outputs text. The LLM is the thing is the smart thing. It's much bigger, like orders of magnitude bigger, and it has much more context, so like all the instructions and the dialogue context. So we're sort of fusing that speech recognition model into the LLM, and we get multilingual out of that, as well as just much more accurate like understanding.
Is that the latency will also improve if you are using speech to speech in Raven v4?
It helps latency rather as well because the model can just straight away start responding to the user. So um, rather than pipelining these two systems together, having to wait for speech recognition to finish,
Mhm.
the model just hears what the user says and then starts to reply. So yeah, so it is also a path for us to improve latency, and of course, like that is a big advantage for us training our own models. Is like we control the exact architecture that they run on and where they run, and we're not competing on the cloud for like we would if we were just wrapping someone else's model. So yeah, I see it as a path to have like to maybe get a few more 100 milliseconds off or something like that.
No, always obsessing over latency here. And it's exciting from a speech to speech perspective because I remember when we were even looking at speech to speech from like a bring your own LLM standard and just initial testing, the models on the market just weren't sufficient for enterprise customer service use cases. We couldn't guarantee the quality. So it's really exciting to see that, that's coming and the technology is there.
Yeah, yeah. The speech-to-speech models are getting better. Like they definitely did start off being bad at things like function calling and stuff, hallucinating weird things, and um, they're getting better. But this is just a way for us to just fast forward to like the point where they're really good at our use case, rather than wait for someone else to train a general purpose model that also works for us. We're just like focused on customer support and making it work across languages and reliably. Yeah.
No, and I think that is really the point to end on, right? We want to make customer service accessible, and effective and efficient. So I think with that, I will thank you both on this wonderful, well, it's Friday as we're recording, but thank you all for listening in, and thank you, Matt and Viola, for joining me today. For listeners, if you're interested in learning more, we are going to have a blog post with a more technical deep dive on Raven v3. But yeah, so thank you all for joining, and I encourage listeners to review and subscribe if you did not at the beginning of this podcast. But yeah, thank you so much.